This is Michael Woodward, and this is episode 77 of the Jumblethink podcast.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumblethink podcast, a podcast focused on telling the stories of dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers. Along the way, we give you some tips on how you can chase your own big idea and dream and create the world you want to live in. Today's guest is Bob Stromberg. More about Bob in a moment. On Thursday's episode, our guest is Nathan Hirsch. Nathan has a background as an e-commerce guru selling over $25 million in products online. Recently, Nathan became the CEO and co-founder of a new company called Free Up. They specialize in creating a marketplace for freelancers. Nathan is a well-known expert in the world of remote hiring. This is a really fun episode, and we dive into some great topics around the world of hiring and finding the right team members for your team. Make sure to check out this episode on Thursday. Do you have a big idea and dream and you don't know where to start? Not only does Jumblethink have this great podcast, but we also provide consulting services to help you on your journey. It's easy to connect up with us, and the first conversation is completely free. Swing on over to jumblethink.com, go to the contact page, and drop us a note. We'd love to know how we can help you chase that big idea and dream and change the world around you. Now let's jump into today's episode with Bob Stromberg. I am super excited about today's guest. His name is Bob Stromberg. He is a comedian, and he's traveled the world telling amazing stories and making audiences laugh around the world. Recently, Bob made a guest appearance on Little Big Shots Forever Young with Steve Harvey. It's a really fun episode. Make sure to check that out. Beyond being just a comedian, he also hosts 2 podcasts and has recently launched an incredible online course called Mastering the Craft of Creativity. Today's episode is a ton of fun, so let's jump into my interview with Bob Stromberg. Bob, thanks for taking time out to be on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Michael. I appreciate it.
Now, you live in the world of comedy and speaking and all of these different elements of creativity. Tell us a little bit about your journey and what led you to the world of comedy, what led you to the world of speaking, and ultimately how you became so creative.
Well, I would love to do that's quite a how long shall we chat here today? Well, I think I was naturally inclined toward comedy. I had both of my parents funny, particularly my dad. I realized early on in my life that I could make my mom and dad laugh, and that just tickled me to think that I could do that. My sisters weren't so good at that, but I could make my mom and dad laugh. I remember in 3rd grade, sitting in a music class, and Miss Nagel, our music teacher, came in, and she was a very large woman, and she came and sat on one of those little round swiveling piano stools with her back to us, which of course was comical. And she had a music box with her, or a music book, and she said, children, open up to page 14. And there was a new song there. I can see it in my mind. I can see the picture at the top of page 14. There was a picture of an Amish fellow walking through a late summer meadow, some storm clouds in the background, little splash of Blue River. And it was the song Shenandoah.
Okay.
And it was, oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you, gone away, you rolling river. I'd never heard it before. Michael, we can hardly imagine how bad that must have sounded to have 33 kids singing at the top of their lungs a song that they don't know, and Miss Nagel banging away at that piano, which was always out of tune. But I sat there, and honest to goodness, I burst into tears.
Wow.
And it's the kind of thing where Miss Nagel made her way down the aisle. I'm sure she thought, well, there must be something wrong at home, which there wasn't. And my classmates all looked at me. Miss Nagel asked me what was wrong, and I couldn't explain because how does a 8-year-old explain being overwhelmed by the beauty of art?
Wow.
But honest to goodness, I recognize now that is what happened to me. 3rd grade, 8 years old. And that became a journey for me. I started writing music as a junior higher, played in groups in high school, played guitar, thought that that's what I wanted to do, and actually did pursue music for many years through college and shortly afterwards. Had the chance to to actually see Marcel Marceau, the great French mime, back in '72. This was before mime was kind of a joke or something to be ridiculed. It was when it was something that was new. I'd never even heard of it before, although I had seen him on Ed Sullivan as a child. But I went to see him at the Paris Opera House when I was over in Europe doing some music, 1972, and I was just blown away. And I thought, I want to learn how to do that. I never had a desire to be a white-faced mime, but I wanted to learn how to learn some of those tools of physicality to express myself with my body. So I studied mime actually for several years. Met a friend there. We kind of teamed up for 2 years to perform together. Ended up performing together for over 10 years, doing school assembly programs all around New England. That gave me the opportunity personally to do a lot of weekend kind of work at conferences and retreats, and then that opened up the business world to me, and pretty soon the years were just kind of piling on top of each other. And at some point maybe in my mid-30s, I remember thinking, I wonder if I'll ever get a real job, because I'd never had an employer before. I mean, I had 5 employers during every week, but I never actually had a company that was employing me. And maybe by the time I was 40, I realized, no, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. And I've ended up now joining a very elite group of artists, writers, performers, I think is a pretty elite group, who have actually managed to pull this off for 40 years of doing what I love doing. And so I'm really, really grateful for that.
Well, it almost sounds like you're on this journey. You're discovering different things that really spur that imagination in you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Along the way, all of a sudden, the light bulb went off, and like, oh, I'm doing a job. I didn't realize that.
Well, it is a job. There's no question, and I love it, and it's very fun, and it's the kind of thing when I'm doing one of the plays that I've written, or when I'm doing my solo comedy stuff. It's the kind of thing where people would look at it and say, boy, that must be so much fun. And it is, but it's also a lot of work. And of course, obviously the travel is that's a lot of work as well. I really, a few years ago, 2 years ago, for 20 years, I've had people saying to me, you need to think about maybe passing on the baton now to a younger generation. And I remember thinking, I have a baton. I didn't realize anybody ever gave me a baton, but I was thinking about that, and I realized, I can't teach some of the things that I do. I mean, I do hand shadows, for crying out loud. I mean, this is what I do is pretty uniquely me, and I can't actually teach that. But I kind of reverse engineered what I've been doing for 40 years, and I realized that the common element that has kept me busy and profitable all these years has been creativity. And that got me really thinking deeply about what is creativity and how does it work. And I discovered that I really believe that there are 2 words that are helpful for us to understand what creativity is and how it works. And the first one is gift, and the second one is craft. Okay. And I've come to understand that creativity is a gift in as much as something of it is woven into our very genes. We're born with it. We were made to do it. But we're not born creative. None of us are born creative. That's not the gift. The gift is the capacity and the desire that we all have, all of our lives, to be creative. We may not know that, especially as adults, when we haven't been creative for so long. But we are born with an innate desire and an ability to express creatively who we are. But I think it gets educated out of most of us in elementary school. I think, we have, especially in the Western world, the way it works is you realize really early on in elementary school that you have to put the one right answer at the end of that question. You have to fill in the blank with the right one word. You have to have the exact right number at the bottom of that mathematical problem. Every number has to be correct. You can't even be 1 digit off. And creativity doesn't work that way. Creativity is not about finding the one right answer. Creativity is about playfully experimenting with many, many possible answers. People say to me, I'm not creative. My sister's creative or my brother's creative, but I've never been creative. And I say, well, you're probably right. You're probably not. If you think you're not, then you're probably not. But you used to be.
Yeah.
When you were a toddler, or before that even, you got up on your hands and knees and rocked back and forth. You didn't even crawl yet, just rocking back and forth, and that was just thrilling. And you learned that you could scrunch up your nose and make your mom or your dad laugh, and that was so much fun. And you learned that you could color with that crayon on that white piece of paper, or as was the case in my family, my 4.5-year-old, who is now an artist as a grown man, he discovered that he could take the pink magic marker and color in every one of those white flowers on mom and dad's new couch. So that was an exciting day in our family. So we all experienced that. It was we opened up that gift, that ability, and that desire. We opened that up as children. And we did it through the medium of play. That was our artistic medium back then. It was play. And still to this day, when we experience creativity as adults, it has a sense of it feels like play. It's that same kind of fun that we had as small children when we were playing. But I don't think that it's real helpful for us to think about creativity as a gift, really. I think it's much more helpful to think about it as a craft. And a craft, in other words, a skill or a process. Because a craft, a skill or a process is something that can be practiced. The fundamentals of creativity, in other words, can be practiced, and we can get better and better at it as long as we know what those fundamentals are. So, and that's what I've been working on for the last couple of years.
It's really cool. I was reading an article yesterday, actually, and they were talking about how this specific individual, in the settings that they've been at, they're expected to have the answer and never say, I don't know. And I think that's something that we're taught, that we always need a response, that we always need an answer. But that creativity, like what you're talking about, really seems like it's birthed from a place of living in the unknown and then creating something out of it.
Yes, it is certainly that way. Although I think it's really important when we're in that place of the unknown, of questioning and wondering, okay, how do I proceed? It's really important to understand, to actually understand the process, to understand the skills that what the skill is. For example, some people are extremely creative, and they're doing so intuitively. It's natural. They've held on to that somehow. They got through those years of maybe they rebelled against that having it educated out of them, and they are intuitively creative and productive. The problem with doing any skill intuitively is, at some point, especially with creativity, you run up against a wall where all of a sudden you hit a dry spell, and if you don't know what the process is, you can't proceed. You can't get out of it. I was listening to Sting do a TED Talk, and he was talking about how, and this is Sting, who has 17 Grammy awards. He's got 37 or 38 nominations. He's won pretty much everything musically you can win. One of the most popular, most wealthy musical performers ever. And Sting said that he had an 8-year period, fairly recently actually, an 8-year period where he did not write one song.
Wow.
And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, so all those years when he was out touring, those 8 years he's out all the time touring, singing, but it was all his old songs. And that's what people wanted to hear. We didn't realize that he was unable to write a song for 8 years. And he described it as, he said, I woke up one morning and my muse was gone.
Wow.
And I listened to that and I went, no, Sting. There's no muse. That was in your mind. There's no muse. The problem is that you haven't understood what the process of creativity is. I really believe this. I actually hope that I hope someday I could have a chance to talk to Sting about this directly. I would say these things to him. The process, as I have thought about it deeply, and as I've thought about, okay, what did I do for 40 years to stay busy? It's a 3-step process, and I put it in an acronym, GIT, and I say this is how you get your masters of creativity, Michael.
Okay.
What you do is you grab anything that grabs you emotionally. And when I say grab, I mean you write it down, or as most of us would talk it into our phones in the note file or Evernote or something.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long to get quite a list of things that grabbed you emotionally. And when I say emotionally, I mean any of your emotions. And I don't mean that make you cry or laugh out loud, although there might be things like that. I mean just thoughts that cross your mind that move you in some way. Or isn't that interesting? Well, that's an emotion. Isn't that interesting? Or, that made me smile when I saw that little girl in the supermarket. Or that ticked me off when I heard that story. And just write these things down, just a sentence maybe, just enough to remember it. And then you go to the second step, which is you interrogate that list. As you scan down through the list, which gets longer and longer and longer, several things will jump out at you. And as if they're saying, pay attention to me, pay attention. Mm-hmm. And then you interrogate it. An interrogator, all interrogators do so to find out the truth. You interrogate those things that jump out at you, and you say, why do you still move me? Why do I wake up sometimes thinking about you? How could I use you? Could you be a story in my book? Could you be an illustration for my speech? Could you be a painting? Are you a piece of choreography? Is this the beginning of a play that I'm writing or a song that I'm writing? And you begin to ask, how could I use you in some way? And then there's a wonderful moment, and you know this, Michael. It's that aha moment where you go, oh, there it is. Oh, great. I know what I can do now. Starts to feel like play a little bit at this moment. And that's the moment that a thought or a memory or experience that you grab, when a thought becomes an idea. Thoughts, memories, experiences, they aren't actionable. They're just there. Yeah. An idea is now actionable. And then so you take that idea and you transform it into whatever it's supposed to be, according to the truth that you've discovered. So you grab and you interrogate and you transform. And I would say to Sting, the problem is you were creating intuitively for so many years, and you were doing it so well, but you were failing to be emotionally awake, to be grabbing stuff all the time, because thoughts are grabbing us all the time, but we're not awake to them. Neuroscience even says this, that every thought that crosses our minds has an emotional component to it. Now, some of it doesn't even rise to the point where we can feel it, but usually those things just go through. We see them, we don't pay any attention, and they're gone.
I remember a couple years ago, I was sitting at my office talking to one of the guys that worked for us, and he was hitting a roadblock. He was one of the designers, creatives, really cool guy, and really great guy, and he just couldn't seem to get past this design and this issue that he was hitting with the design element for what we were building. And I asked him, I said, what inspires you? What gets your emotions churning? And he couldn't recognize it. He couldn't figure it out. He just looked at me and he said, what do you mean? What inspires me? And I'm like, well, something has to inspire you. Something has to captivate you. You can't, if you don't have ownership of that in your own life, then you can't really pour it back in. And in the world of creativity, I think that really highlights, you can be on autopilot, but people, they notice that. So maybe someone's struggling with getting that. What is that G thing of the get process? What is that thing that just captivates me, that inspires me, that flip a switch in me to get going? What are some practical steps some people can take to start that process?
Well, I think that in some ways, what you really, I understand the way you use the word autopilot, so I'm not misunderstanding that. But in some ways, we want to be on autopilot, and by that I mean what we need to do with creativity is to develop a habit from it. And you've heard the expression that it takes, or the saying, it takes 21 days to form a habit. Neuroscientists now have actually proven that is actually the case. It takes 21 days. If you spend 4 to 15 minutes a day intently thinking about something or working on one thing, intently doing so, in 21 days, you have developed a brand new neural pathway that was not there in your brain, didn't even exist 21 days earlier. Now, it's not a strong one. It'll fall apart pretty quickly if you stop using it. But if you repeat that 21-day cycle 2 or 3 more times, so now you're up to 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
2.5 months. You have a strong neural pathway that's there for life. So if you can practice the grabbing and interrogating and transforming process, if you practice it intently for 4 to 15 minutes a day, 21 days, you'll start to feel like it's getting more natural. And I would say even if you just practiced grabbing for 21 days, you would be amazed how after half of that time and after 21 days, you're seeing stuff that you didn't even see before. Quick illustration. I was in Dublin, Ireland with a play that I wrote with a couple buddies a few years.
Is that the triple espresso?
Yeah, triple espresso.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's been not all over the world. It's been many places in the world. We were in the West End of London, and we were 2 years in Dublin. And every night coming home from the Andrews Lane Theatre, I would walk by an art store, and it was beautifully lit up in the window. And there was a large box with probably 300 or 400 pastel crayons or chalk sticks. It's not a crayon or a chalk stick, it's paint, but pastel sticks.
Yeah.
And of course, they were in gradations of color. It was just so pretty to look at. And every night I stopped and looked at it, and it began to grab me. I'd like to try that. I would really like to try that sometime. So I went in and bought a box, not that big box. It would have cost me thousands of dollars, but I bought a small box of pastels and some paper that's kind of sandy, on it. And I started painting a bit. And that led me to 5 years of painting very intently and really enjoying it. And what I discovered in the process of doing that and repeating that 21-day cycle many, many times is I began to see the world. When I say see, I mean visually. I began to see the world completely differently than I ever had seen it before. For example, I discovered that shadows are rarely just gray. Clouds are rarely just white. Chrome, that was the one that really blew me away. Chrome, if I said to you, Michael, if I said, okay, here's your box of crayons, draw me a chrome bumper on that truck.
Yeah.
You'd probably choose what color of a crayon?
Probably silver.
Yeah, of course you would. And everybody would. When in reality, the only reason we think that chrome is silverish is because it's on a road. So it's reflecting a road, and that makes it look silver. But the chrome isn't silver at all. The chrome, when you look closely, I walk up to a chrome bumper and look at it. It is just a mass of bright colors because it's reflecting the sky, it's reflecting your shirt, in your pants, it's reflecting the black tops, reflecting the color of the car. It's just a mass of color. There's and almost no silver in it at all. Wow. And I realized that I hadn't seen the world because I hadn't trained myself to see the world. Painting, drawing, perspective, for example. Most people have no idea how perspective works until they try to draw it. And then they realize, oh my goodness, this doesn't even look real at all because they don't understand perspective. Well, when you draw 4 to 15 minutes a day or hours a day, you wake up visually because of what you're doing, painting or drawing. With creativity, you wake up emotionally. And that's why art is created through the creative process. And art is always an expression of what's happening emotionally in whoever's writing it.
Well, you talk about all of this, and one of the things that is super highlighted in what you're saying is the importance of observation. And that's, you talk about the things that grab you, the things that bring you in, and then you go through that get process. How can you start taking action on the observations you make?
You need to start by starting. Most people haven't even they haven't started. You have to be about the process. You have to actually do it. You have to get your phone. You have to have it ready. You have to say, today I'm going to wake up. I'm going to think about, does anything grab me emotionally? And here's the truth, Michael. And I found this with my students. A lot of them are going, nothing grabbed me today.
Wow. That's like impossible.
Well, I know, but many have said, nothing grabbed me. Well, this sort of did. Oh, did you write it down? Okay, you got it. All right, do it again tomorrow, and do it again tomorrow.
Yeah.
So how do you start is, well, you need to actually intentionally start. It doesn't happen automatically,
right,
until it becomes a habit. And then it's easy. Then you can't stop grabbing. It's there all of the time. We're creatures of habit, and we often think about habit as being negative things. But habits are really wonderful. They're so dependable. You can count on them. They're going to come through for you. When you shower in the morning, you get out of the shower, and think about this. You dry your body off. It's like choreography. It's exactly the same. Day after day after day. You don't start and dry this part one day and then the next day you start on a different part. No, you do it exactly the same every day. You put the same shoe on every morning, whether it's your right one or left one. You put that one on first every day, and we don't even think about it. That's what has to happen with creativity to really work well.
I want to dive into creativity and success, but before I dive into that question, how do you define success?
For myself, it's easy to feel that success has to do with people recognizing, people giving value to your work, people paying you to do your work. All those things in our culture are things that define what success is. And I get that. And if somebody doesn't value what I do, I feel less successful. But I think that's more a cultural definition than it is a true one or a spiritual one. In reality, I think that we're successful when we are pursuing and doing what we were created to do and to be. And I know that leads us into a whole other area of, well, how do I know what I'm supposed to do? How do I know what I am supposed to be? And I think part of that is, what brings you joy? What do you just love to do? My wife, Judy, who is a remarkably creative woman, she hasn't worked outside the home. And there were times early on in our marriage where she felt like maybe she didn't have the value that some other people have because, I don't work outside the home. I'm just here all day. I'm baking, and she's a remarkable baker. I'm baking, and I'm with my boys, my small children, and sometimes I feel like because the world doesn't seem to value that, it doesn't have value. When in reality, that was what gave her the most joy. There's no doubt about that. And so I guess my definition of success would be finding ways to do well and do better and better all the time what it is that brings you joy, because I think those are the things that we were made to do. So it may not be vocational.
Yeah.
It might be avocational, but if you don't do those things, if it's, I have a job and then on the weekends I hang out.
Yeah.
Well, on the weekends, maybe you do those things that just bring you the most joy.
Even in what you were sharing earlier and about how you got into what you're doing, identity is such a critical part of being creative. When you understand how you're made, how your personality is, the bent of things that you like and dislike, that really opens up avenues of creativity. And it sounds like a lot of people who are living in that deep place of the creative really have a grasp on themselves in a lot of ways.
Well, I was so fortunate in that regard because I'm going to tell you this story. This is unbelievable. It's quick. I'm 21, 22 years of age. I'm sitting with my wife. We're expecting a child. We're sitting around a table with my mother and my father. And my dad said to me, "So, Bob, what are your intentions?" Meaning, what are you going to do with your life? And I said to them, and this is my dad, the doctor of education. This is my mom, the teacher. I said to them, "I'm going to mime school." Okay. Now, this is like a scene out of a movie.
Right.
Except it really isn't, because I think most movies would not even imagine the scene going the way that it did. My parents' faces changed, as you might expect. But here's the way they changed. They lit right up.
Wow.
My mom looked right at me, and she said, on behalf of both of my parents, she said, "Oh, Bobby," she said, "that's perfect." So what that meant is my mom and my dad knew their boy so well. When he said, "I'm going to mime school," that most parents would say, "What, are you out of your mind? You need to get a job. You need to," no, they said, "No, you need to go toward who you were made to be." And to me, that is, I think you'll agree, what a gift that was.
Yeah.
And I've had that with me my whole life. I haven't had to try to prove to my parents that what I'm doing is valuable. They knew it from the beginning. They encouraged me to do it. So that's been a wonderful thing.
You see this all the time, the expectations that parents put on children, or expectations of schools saying, "Oh, no, the next step you need to do is X, Y, and Z." And yet it doesn't really line up with who that person is. And it becomes a cage to constrain them from the possibilities for them to walk into their creative purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I am not anti-academics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although I was not a great student myself because I was so captured by the creative side, and I didn't have those outlets in my small rural school in northern Pennsylvania. But I'm not anti-academic. However, most of my friends many who I admire so much, and I just admire their talents and their gifts. Many of them didn't go to college, or they went for a year and realized, no, I think I need to head right into music. I need to head right into theater. Or whatever. And also when you think about today with people going to college and coming out with $100,000 worth of loans, and all they have is a bachelor's, and now what do I do? I just think it's more evidence that we need to think carefully about maybe not using college as a place like it used to be, a place to go and find out who you are.
Right.
But maybe find out who you are before you go, so you don't come out having changed your major 3 times, right, and not knowing what you're doing and having a huge debt.
Yeah.
Just that's an aside, obviously, but
no, I completely agree. I think that college and universities and other avenues of learning are so significant, but without the purpose of why you're going there, it's just a waste of time and energy, and definitely money anymore.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
So how can creativity lead to success for those who might be thinking outside the norms, or people who want to take the risk and say, "Hey, I'm going to go a path that's less traveled"? How can creativity and success maybe go in hand, and how can creativity lead to that success?
I think especially if you're going off on your own, I think they absolutely do go hand in hand. Once again, creativity, learning to be creative, practicing those disciplines helps you to wake up emotionally, so that when you wake up emotionally, you start to understand more who you are. You're more aware of who you are. You're more aware of what moves you in one direction or the other. If you're not aware of what's happening inside you, how can you discern which direction you should go,
Right.
or which decisions you should make? And I would say, if you're not aware of what's going on inside of you, the only way you can make a decision about anything is to do what somebody else tells you to do. And that's what happens in the workplace very often, is that somebody says, have this done on my desk by Tuesday, and have it done this way, and have it set up in this format, and it has to be perfect. And again, it's just a continuation of what you were working on in school. School does train people. Our educational system, it can train people to be good workers if they do it well.
Right.
If you know how to answer the questions in school and get something done, if you know how to write that paper, when your English teacher said write that paper, when you have to write the paper in the business setting, you'll be able to do that as well. I'm not sure that has anything to do with creativity, frankly. But if you're going off on your own, like you said, if you're thinking about going a different direction, you better be emotionally wide awake and very much alive to be able to discern where you should be heading and what kind of decisions that you should make.
I want to really pivot here. One of the things that you talk about a lot, and I think it's as I watched videos, as I read different things that you've written and things that have been written about you, one of the things that stood out to me, and it's an area that captivates me, is storytelling. And you are really a master of the art of storytelling. You know, a lot of people think of comedians, they think, set up, punchline, and just that, the mechanics of the stand-up comedian, but it's not what you do. You are a storyteller, and in that, there's a lot of funny things that happen. How can creating a narrative really extend us into creating movements or even positioning ourselves into our destiny?
Well, certainly for writers, certainly for artists. Again, what we're doing is we are waking up emotionally. And that when I tell my stories, and the way I found the stories that I found is I mind, M-I-N-E-D, I mind my past, because there's a treasure trove of artistic raw material there in the past. So I went back and I just scoured my past and trying to wake up there and remember what went on. One of the things that I do in the course that I teach online, Mastering the Craft of Creativity, is I encourage people to work with photographs. In my case, of course, those photographs were either in albums that I could actually hold in my hand, or I had 2,000 photographs and photographic slides in my old family slideshow, which really was a goldmine for me comedically. I have a 10-minute piece, which is my old family slideshow, which it's one of my most highly requested pieces that I do. But I also was able to go in there and use those slides, and through several techniques to look at them to see what is within the frame. What do I remember of what's just within the frame? And now looking at what's within that frame, where does it take me outside of the frame in terms of memories?
That's good.
And in the process of doing that, I was able to honestly, it's as close to time travel as one can get, actually, if you intently head back into your past in this way. And there's that treasure trove of memories. And one of the advantages of age, or in looking back into memories, even if you're only looking back a year or 2 years, you have a perspective on what happened there that you didn't have at the time that things happened.
Yeah.
And that's kind of exciting. I mean, another piece that I do, I have a 8-minute piece probably that I do in my comedy act about the colonoscopy.
Yeah.
My first colonoscopy at age 50, which by the way, surprisingly, I have to tell your listeners here, surprisingly, it's it's a squeaky clean piece. It's not even there's nothing the children listen to this. They don't know what a colonoscopy is. So I tell it in a way that there's nothing inappropriate about when I tell it. Because you could easily go the other direction, obviously, and have it just be scatological humor. But this is a very clean piece, but extremely funny piece. Well, I couldn't write that, in the month after, right afterwards. I was too close to the event. Looking back on it, I was able to, in my memory, to find all kinds of things that were really helpful in writing a very, very funny piece, or looking at a lot of slides, very, very, very poignant pieces and memories that came back to me. And it's so much easier from the perspective of being a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ahead of something. It's so much more effective to look back and have a perspective on it that allows you to find out, well, what was the meaning in that moment? Yeah. You start to see turning places in your lives where, you know what, I could have made this decision then, and I don't know where I would have been had I made that decision. I made this one instead. And you can see those now, but you can't see them when you're in the middle of it. Even if you know you're at a crossroads, you don't know what the significance of that decision is going to be then. But you know it later when you look back upon it. So I'm not sure that answered your question, but that's where my mind went with that.
That's great. You mentioned your wife, Judy, and both you and her are really involved in a great organization called Compassion International.
Oh, yes, we are.
Tell us about that and why that's so significant for both of you to be involved with it.
We actually, our first year of marriage, 1974 and 75, we did 1 year of short-term Christian mission work. We went to the country of Zaire, which is now the Republic of Congo. Right. Zaire, by the way, I think you're too young to remember this, although maybe you know about it. Zaire is the country where the Rumble in the Jungle happened. That was the Muhammad Ali, George Foreman fight. And so we were actually at the ages of 21 and 19 years of age. My wife and I were actually at the Rumble in the Jungle.
That's crazy.
It was broadcast at 4 a.m. in the morning so that it could be viewed at 9 a.m. at 9 p.m. in New York City. Wow. But we were actually there. But we spent a year in doing short-term missions there. 1 year we were in Africa. And we saw what it was like to live in the third world. And we saw what it was like to be a child in the third world. And we got to know the woman who came to our door every day with a basin full of fruit on top of her head, pineapples, grapefruits, bananas. Every day she would come. And she was about a 5'5" woman. She had a baby strapped to her back. She had this basin on top of her head. She would take it down. I would take a couple pieces of fruit. And then she would ask me for help to put it back on top of her head, and off she would go. And it was so heavy that I could not lift it to the top of her head without her help. Wow. That's how heavy it was. Wow. This is the way that, and it affected me deeply to realize this is the way people live. This is the way children grow up. Speaking of creativity, by the way, if you are a child in Africa and you're hauling water 5 hours a day, not a lot of time left or energy left for creativity. Yeah. So that's what happens to children in the third world. It's a little different for us here. But as a result of doing that, when we came back, we were moved every time we heard about Africa or saw pictures of Africa or saw kids in Africa. And then we learned, and this has probably been 25 years now, we learned about this Christian organization, Compassion International. And they describe themselves really as a child development organization. Yeah. Because for the money that we give each month, and then I also speak on behalf, I sometimes have the opportunity to represent Compassion when I'm at an event and to speak on their behalf and ask and to recruit people to join Compassion. For the $38 that we give a month per child, that child not only gets all of the food that they need to be healthy, But also if there are medical needs, medicines. One of our children, we had a picture. It came recently. She had a cast on her arm, so she had broken her arm, but she had a cast. Well, she wouldn't have had a cast if she hadn't been with Compassion International. Yeah. So it's food and medicine and education. They have an opportunity through the Compassion Project to be educated. Every one of the Compassion projects is associated with a church, and not a church that just started up, but a church that has been there and proven that they're there for the long haul for these kids, and that they're loving kids in Christ's name. So they get food, they get medicine, they get an educational opportunity. And so what happens is, through Compassion International, you lift one child out of poverty, literally. And in the process of lifting one child and a family out of poverty, you're lifting the rest of that family this much further out of poverty as well. So it's been a really gratifying work. We've actually had the chance to go to Guatemala and Brazil and Honduras and meet a couple of the kids that we sponsored, which has been a really wonderful thing. So Compassion International, your listeners may want to check them out. They're the best. There's another one, by the way, World Relief too. It's a different delivery system, but World Relief too is an organization, a wonderful organization that does a similar kind of work with kids.
Yeah, great organizations. So cool that you're involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of stuff going on. You've got your podcast, you've got your one-word video series, you've got some great resources like your book about Stinky Bay. How can people find you, connect with you, check out your Mastering the Craft of Creativity course? How can they find all of that?
Very easily. They can go to my website, which is Bob Stromberg, just the way it sounds, although Berg at the end of Strom is spelled E-R-G. So bobstromberg.com. And if they go to bobstromberg.com/jumble, I've put together a page just for your listeners. And on that page, they'll find some resources that they will enjoy. There's a 60-second, not even 60-second creativity quiz there. It's 3 simple questions, multiple choice. And the name of the quiz is, Are You As Creative as Steve Martin?
Okay.
And I realize that most of your listeners probably already know or think they know the answer to that question, but it's quite a revealing quiz there, test. And then there's a free 30-minute training video on creativity, which talks a lot more about this grabbing, interrogating, and transforming process. Even if people just viewed the training video and didn't get the course, it could really help them immensely. And the course is there as well. The course is a bigger deal. It drips out for 6 weeks, 1 week at a time. It takes 3 or 4 months to work your way through it. There's no time schedule. I mean, when students come on, they have as much time as they need, and there's no competition to get through it in a hurry. So, but most people take 4 or 5 months to work their way through it. But in that time, they really do develop a strong creative habit, a creative neural pathway. And I speak on creativity at conferences and conventions. And I also, I'm a comedian. That's what I do. That's my main source of income. So if there are people out there with organizations that are looking for a great night of, it's clean comedy, by the way, but it's very, very funny comedy. And that's what I've done all these years. So I'm always happy to do that. And of course, my podcast, The Wide-Eyed Creative, Wide-Eyed Creative. I've been doing now for 3 or 4 months, and I'm committed to hanging in there for the long haul with that. Really loving that, enjoying it a lot. So,
thanks so much for creating that little special landing place for our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
The link will be in the episode note, so if you missed it, you can always find it. Let's jump into our rapid fire questions. These are questions I ask in every episode, and they're just a lot of fun.
Okay.
What is one tip you would give someone with a big idea or dream and they simply don't know where to start?
Proceed.
Okay.
They have to proceed. They have to do something. So Honestly, I get tired of people. I don't mean tired. I don't mean this in an irritated way, but I hear this all the time. I just don't know I don't know how to start. Don't know how to start. Well, yes, you do. Do something. Proceed, start, and see what happens. That will lead you to the next thing. That will lead you to the next thing.
You travel a lot. You have a worldview that's informed by experience. What is one change you'd like to see in the world?
Though our social media has been a wonderful thing in terms of helping people to connect, and I've loved it for that reason, to get in touch with people I haven't seen for 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. And that's been such a great thing. And to really, in other cases, to develop friendships through social media. It seems to me that our social media has also created tremendous divisions in the world, in worldviews, and also particularly in the United States, with our political situation being what it is. It's really become impossible to have caring, loving conversations, it seems to me. So I would like to see that change. I'm not sure how that would happen, because it's not going to happen by rules being. It shouldn't happen by rules, new rules being made or laws being made about what you're allowed to say and what you're not. I think it would have to happen by having a real change in people's hearts. And I'm not sure how that happens except one person at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you want your legacy to be?
I guess I want people to understand that I am a person who really sought to be the man that God made me to be, using the talents that I'm given and that I was created to use, and that I've been faithful in doing that in a loving way in the world.
It's really good. It's really good. Who or what inspires you?
Well, I'm inspired by people who have actually been able to do effectively what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I'm inspired by a guy like Steve Martin, who had a stand-up career that lasted for about 15 years. And then he had a movie career. And then he had a career as a screenwriter. And then he had a career as a playwright. And then he had has a career as a banjo player, a songwriter, a Broadway executive producer for his Broadway show. Somebody who is able to take the time in their life to create so many mediums that they can do so well. I've always told people, if you want to be a performer, learn everything you can, because you will use it all. And when I look at Steve Martin, who is obviously somebody at the very, very top of his field, and it has been for many, many years, that's what he has done. He has used so many mediums and learned how to do each one of them so well. And I think that has contributed to his success.
What are you currently reading, watching, or listening to?
I'm currently watching a television series on Netflix called Chef's Table.
Oh, it's awesome. That's a great one.
It is awesome. And for all of your listeners, because I know you've got your listeners are people who are interested in creativity.
Yeah.
Chef's Table is absolutely, it's an example of one chef each time, one creative person, a chef, one of the top 50 chefs in the world, who actually has used this grabbing, interrogating, and transforming process to become the chef that they have. To a person, most of these chefs have studied under the great French masters, and they have become experts, and they have experienced great success cooking in that tradition. But then to a person they found themselves unsatisfied, which means now, Michael, that something was grabbing them. Something is not right. What is wrong here? And they even say it like that. Something is not right. And they realize that they're doing what somebody else is telling them to do just by cooking in that tradition of the French masters. And so almost to a person, they interrogate what they're feeling, what they're grabbing, and they decide, I'm going back home, or I'm opening my own restaurant, or I'm moving across the world, where whatever. I'm going to make this move so that I can do something that is truly me, that comes from my memories as a child when my grandma did this or I did this. And they're grabbing and they're interrogating and they're going toward what moves them personally and uniquely. And then they're transforming it often into these remarkable foods and dishes that only they have made. Nobody else makes this dish. And then they've risen to a level of success beyond what they could have even imagined, or what any of the critics could have even imagined until they did it. So often they made these moves in the face of great criticism from critics saying, "Oh, why is this person doing that? Why are they opening their own restaurant? This will never succeed. Why are they moving to that tiny town in northern Sweden? He can never succeed there. Why is he trying to make food out of leaves and grass and snails and things that he found?" And yet these people went back to who they really were, and they transformed into something incredible. So,
it's such a captivating show. I can't get enough of it. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
What is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
My podcast is a dream that just began 4 months ago. It was I'd been on lots of podcasts talking about creativity in the last couple of years, and as a result of that, people started saying to me, "You should be podcasting." And I thought, I've got so many things going. That's going to be really time consuming. And then my two grown sons, who are a tough audience, by the way. They both said to me independently. Wow. They said to me, "Dad, you should have a podcast of your own. This would be perfect for you." And I said, I think I'm a little late to the game. And they said, no, you're not late to the game. You're not late to the game at all. Just get in. And I went, I'm going to do that. So I do have a dream that my podcast would reach a large audience. Right now, I probably have 1,000 downloads a month or so. It's small, but it's coming along, and it's growing by a couple hundred every month. And I'm hoping that I might be able to actually have that succeed.
That's really cool. Bob, it has been so much fun having you on the podcast. I love talking about ideas and creativity, so it's definitely been exciting for me. Thanks for taking time out to share your story.
You are so welcome. Thank you, Michael. You're a gentleman.
I want to thank today's guest, Bob Stromberg, for taking time out to share his story and insights into the world of creativity. To check out more about Bob, swing on over to bobstromberg.com/jumble. bobstromberg.com/jumble, and you can find some great resources there. On Thursday, our guest is Nathan Hirsch. He is a social entrepreneur, and in the past, he has been an e-commerce guru. He is also the CEO and co-founder of FreeUp, a marketplace for freelancers. They specialize in helping companies create an amazing team of remote workers that can meet their project goals. It's a really fun episode, and you'll want to make sure to check that out this Thursday. Jumblethink is all about creating a community for people with big ideas and dreams. One of the ways we do that is through our podcast, but we also have some great channels through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Make sure you swing on over to jumblethink.com and click on the links to find our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages. Follow and subscribe there, and you'll never miss anything going on in the Jumblethink community. I want to thank you, the listener, for taking time out to listen to our amazing guests. It means the world to us that you would take time out to hear the stories from people that inspire us and hopefully inspire you. Throughout the episode, we gave you some tips and ideas of how you can chase your own big idea and dream. Now take the first step today. Go out there and do something awesome to move that big idea and dream forward and ultimately create the world you want to live in.
Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps. Vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.